Well, welcome again. Why don't we just start off with a few introductions? Maybe just a bit about yourself, your background, and we can start with Tanya and come to this side then.
Sure. Well, thanks for inviting me. So my name is Tanya Andreasyan. I am the editor-in-chief of FinTech Futures, which is a publishing platform for the FinTech community worldwide. And my background is in journalism as well as consulting. So my background is in core banking systems, actually. So I know the market pretty well. And I know lots of gossip, which I might or might not share.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jacqui Morecombe. I'm responsible for go-to-market at nCino for EMEA. I was delighted to hear some active discussion on the previous presentation around nCino, so we'll be happy to talk about it later. But I've been working in lending and financial transformation for the past 13 years. And nCino provides loan origination, customer onboarding across retail, commercial, and SME clients.
Thanks. Good morning. My name is Ludger Küpper. I'm Managing Director and Head of Banking Practice Area of BCG Platinion. For those who don't know BCG Platinion, so we are 100% subsidiary of the Boston Consulting Group. So we are doing basically IT management consulting. Our sweet spots are basically, and also referring to what we are talking today, are CBS vendor selections, and we are running large transformations, digital transformations, and also agile transformations. And I think we will talk today a little bit about, okay, what is driving change, from our perspective, because we are talking to most of the at least larger incumbents, you would say, but also with fintech companies. What is driving change and what are the hurdles, let's say, we see which needs to be taken to modernize their systems and compete with the market.
Yeah. Excellent, thank you. So yeah, we'll want to dive into a few different stories and have a few questions. I think we also actually have a Slido going around as well. And I believe I'll have a little iPad to take a look at some of the questions, which hopefully gets in my hands sometime soon. So then you can also feel free to jump in and ask questions, and we'll go through a few topics that we have in mind already. So I guess maybe we could just start off starting with the fintech era itself right now. We've obviously seen a lot of venture-backed companies popping up over the last little while, a lot of them also getting a lot of investment. How do you see this sort of playing out over the next couple of years? Do you think is this the early days, is this going to continue to boom? Where do you see this kind of the venture-backed, completely purely greenfield fintechs kind of coming into the market?
Well, fintech is like the hottest word now, right? Yeah. Even in mainstream media, everybody talks about it. And there is so much attention and investment going on. So we are definitely, I feel, in a massive bubble. And at some point, all this investment will have to start bear fruit, or things will stop, going very sour. And I'm pretty sure for lots and lots of companies, it's not going to be a happy story. But for some of them, it will. And you have to be, I suppose, a bit in the right place, in the right time, with the right technology, and a bit of luck in the back end. So, I mean, you already guys, I'm sure, have seen what's going on, say, with WeWork. And I know WeWork is not a fintech company, but it's kind of pretends to be a tech company, which in reality it's like a real estate company. And you can see how things are developing really fast and really badly. But there is lots of opportunity, because there are lots and lots of banks and financial institutions in the market in general that is looking for new technology, for new way of working, for new processes. So the opportunities are there. It's just what it is that you offer, and that will dictate whether you're going to be successful or not. So you have to offer more than just a snazzy PowerPoint presentation.
Do you think that if you describe it as a bubble from at least the venture-backed side of it, do you think it'll hit companies differently that are providing their services to banks and to established financial institutions? So let's say obviously some of the technology providers here, like nCino and others, is it going to affect them differently than it will that are those that are actually trying to provide direct consumer banking products, like the startup banks and challengers? Or do you think they're all kind of will be affected by the same way?
I think probably quite a lot of them are going to be affected by the same way, because if you, like, for example, the latest trend everybody's talking about is AI, right? So everything is AI. if you look, every single fintech or technology provider, startup, when they're doing a presentation, they're all artificial intelligence. But when you dig deeper, quite often it's human-assisted AI, which means it's a PowerPoint or an Excel spreadsheet with an offshore team somewhere that fills it out. So, so for companies like that, and there is many of them, that will affect them adversely. At the same time, for lots of banks that are trying to reach consumers, like challenger banks, a lot of them, do they really offer a differentiating service? Can they scale? Is there enough appetite? Is there enough interest? So they will be affected too.
Well, I think it's about being buzzword compliant, right? When you're out pitching, if you throw some really exciting buzzwords out there, then those that don't understand what you're saying will just check that box. Certainly speaking from the nCino perspective, looking at the new entrants that are coming into the market and looking at how they're challenging the incumbents. And they're actually driving the incumbents to start thinking about how they differentiate to the customers. So even if some of the challengers aren't really that financially successful, the fact that customers are moving towards them makes you think twice. And for us, it's great because we're working with the challengers and we're working with the incumbents. So for nCino, it's forcing some of the incumbents to think twice.
Kind of last one sort of on that same topic, I was wondering, do you see sort of similar parallels, taking kind of this fintech era view of what happened with just new technology in the late 90s, early 2000s, when of course there was a bubble, there was a huge crisis, but then sitting where we are now, looking back, the most valuable companies in the world are tech companies. Tech is dominating everything. Cloud is dominating. So kind of the promise of the late 90s did come to fruition, and we're all living in it right now. Yet there was still obviously a huge bubble, yet there was still a huge crisis. Do you think those parallels are as true in our space as it was back then?
Well, definitely, absolutely. And you think that once the bubble bursts, and it will burst, something beautiful will emerge, will take us to the next level. Like the best will remain, right? Or maybe the luckiest ones. So.
And Ludger, from your point of view, I mean, how do you think the banks would respond? There's obviously a lot of interest from them in terms of what's happening in fintechs. But assuming, let's say, venture capital just slows down in terms of neobanks, how do you think that's going to affect the way that banks respond and the speed that they respond to what is still fundamentally the fintech era and the digital age, where all the things that we heard in the earlier session are still true? But assuming that the dynamics change in the market, how do you think the banks will respond?
Well, I see that they feel the pressure from the fintechs, and I think you have to differentiate between fintechs offering services directly to the consumer, or which are providing services, for example, for financial institutions. So what we see, and I mean, Boston Consulting Group, we observe the market, and we have the fintech tower, and we see it's not growing anymore so much. So there might be a decline, and I agree. I would also assume, because I know already the first bubble,
Right?
that there might be, let's say, some decline, and not all will make it. But there are a couple of good innovations, and the banks, the incumbents, are looking exactly at those innovations, and also how they can enrich their offering, and also in terms of technology change, which is more our business, because there are a huge gap between incumbents, grown banks, especially here in Central Europe or Europe, maybe different in Asia. But here they have much more down-to-earth problems, because they're running on mainframes or whatever. They can't do only CDCI, instant deployments, for example, all that kind of stuff. So that's where they look at fintechs. Where can I buy some services? And also try to plug it into my existing application landscape. Yes, right. And which principles also the fintechs are providing can I make use of? So I think this is something where they can benefit from. And after, I think we have seen a decade of regulatory tsunami. So all the incumbents were stuck in being compliant and so on. And now we see more innovation. They're going to modernize the application landscape. They break up their silos. The monolithic systems. And it's good also that, especially in Europe, it seems that the regulators are greenlighting more cloud services. Which was when I talk to CIOs, they always say, okay, can I move to the cloud? I have doubts, whether I'm allowed to. But now it's becoming a little bit, or we get the impression that this is being much more possible than in the past. So I think we will see a lot of innovation over the next years there.
But I think it's difficult, right? If you're working for a traditional financial institution, you're facing a completely different world, and with all the best intentions and all the aspirations of innovation, you have some very real problems like mainframe, legacy technology, and the regulation tsunami, where you're just trying to pull your data together. I mean, we hear about banks still using credit bureau information to get a single customer view of their own customer, because they can't pull that information fast enough to be able to make decisions. Whereas you have these new challenges that come in, and they have no appetite for huge IT teams and development teams just to build out and take forever to go live and start serving their customers. So they start cloud first because they can. And I think that makes a big difference in the ability to run fast and differentiate.
And what we see, and maybe to add, is, I mean, there are a couple of driving forces to initiate the change. So we have seen banks in the broader Middle East space. They had problems, let's say, with their image because they were recognized, old-fashioned, etc. And so they set up a greenfield bank to also address younger people, the millennials, for example, and they start. Let's say new products, hook products, more in the retail space. What we see is, and they don't want to have 1 year of CBS core banking system selection. So they want to start quick. They want to do it more in an agile way, maybe also with an agile team. And I think that's the sweet spot where more the open banking providers will come into place, because they start with the idea. I mean, I will take services from that vendor, and that vendor. And that is a real best of breed. So going 10, 15 years back in time, best of breed was a concept. It was very famous. But if you let's say try to implement that, with the technology that was offered at that time, it was a nightmare. So and then most also in our business, consulting business, recommended more to go for a more silo, monolithic way, because you don't have to do so much integration on your own, etc., etc. Today, that has completely changed, I would say. So it's more open, it's more standardized. It's really more a plug and play, I think. That's why I also like your, let's say, marketing of composing banking applications or banking platforms. So I think that is a way. We are not there, but that starts, and what we see is they are, let's say, figuring that out with new products or new business lines. They set up besides their legacy, because that will take a lot of time, a lot of money. Everybody is aware of the risks.
And I think just to add to that, you can see big incumbents are now going, oh, us too, look, we are launching a digital challenger bank, or we are launching this and that. So any consideration is it's not just to be able to innovate and innovate fast, but to be able to imitate and imitate fast. And this is where the technologies come into play. So you have to have the right solutions and services that will enable you to get up and running with whatever it is that you are trying to get up and running, even if it's like just imitation of a challenger bank, very quickly.
And for those sort of spin-offs, and maybe Ludger, you can address that, what do you think is actually driving the real motivation for that? Is it really, so there's maybe just the pure marketing sort of way. So, okay, we have a digital bank, check, right? So you can address it at the shareholders meeting and say, we have one over there. It's doing some stuff. Or you can actually see it as an opportunity, perhaps purely on the technology side, maybe learn about new technologies out there, how you work in the cloud, et cetera. But there's also perhaps an element, I guess, of the operational part of it, because using new technology that we talk about here is only so relevant unless you actually change how you actually use it, your internal operations. If your operations and processes and thinking is the same, you can have the absolutely best and latest, but you're not going to reap any of the benefits.
Yeah.
So behind the scenes, what do you kind of see of stories which was actually kind of driving these ones? You can feel free, no, of course, not to name names, but it'd be nice to know actually what is really happening behind the scenes, really.
No, I was just laughing a little bit because you said, okay, we're doing a little bit of marketing and have a good press story, etc. for the stakeholders. There was a case, indeed, we had to run a due diligence, a tech due diligence on a fintech, because from the incumbent financial institutions group, because before the investor day, they wanted to close the deal or at least have some kind of agreement to give that to the press, and to the marketing. So there are really those kind of stories, but that's maybe not the usual way. As I said, there are a lot of driving forces behind. I think at least what we recognize is all that kind of digitization or digital topics. They are driven by two forces. One is being more customer-centric, of course, because they feel the pressure from the neobanks and also from the digital attackers. But second, what we see is, and it's a very simple one, we see a lot of cost pressure in the market. So I think over the last 10 months, the amount of digitization projects or cost-cutting projects raised significantly. So, and there are a lot also of banks, they want to digitize their core processes, end to end. And that is a very simple story, frankly speaking. Because as you know, there's a lot of pressure from the interest rates. So you only have fees are more or less the key revenue pools anymore. And on the other hand, you have to reduce your costs. So they try to break up or they want to avoid the media breaks they have in their processes, and be more efficient in that way, also to gain a competitive advantage. So that is a second big reason. Then there's a rationale on, let's say, burning or near to burning platforms. So that is something I have, let's say, discussed in the last 2 weeks a couple of times. That they're saying, okay, we are missing the capabilities. So we are running off of our capabilities in COBOL, in C, I don't know where. So we have to face that challenge. What can we do? So, and then you discuss between some evolutionary approach, so to take out functionality from the existing monolithic system and bring it to a more modern platform, or you go the way with the core banking, commercial off-the-shelf package. So these are the question behind. Right. But I mean, you need to be aware that this way will never be a business case. So the amortization is quite long, and this is on the other hand something where also the C-levels are a little bit reluctant. I mean, to approve 100 million or more for changing your core banking system. So it's maybe more on, let's say, starting small and then let's say also fund the journey by doing a lot of the business as usual portfolio to modernize your existing platform.
But for the pure kind of economic side of it, if you take the more evolutionary journey, like we also had from the McKinsey presentation this morning, then you're also then, I guess, acknowledging at the same time that you're kind of making an investment and probably increasing costs over the short term to end up at sometime longer term where you can actually decrease, right? Because fundamentally, you're not going to just turn off old systems. You're not going to go change everything. So that means you're realistically going through a phase of actually increased costs, increased investments, hopefully with an outcome that is significantly more attractive economically. Is that how they're looking at it as well?
It is, but mostly it's not that long term, because I mean the amortization of changing our core banking system, I think you will agree on that, hopefully. I mean, it's beyond 5 years usually. Yeah. So even the implementation time is usually 3 years. Yeah. So 5 years would even be a good ratio. So that's why they say yes, in the long run, we will gain efficiencies. And if you look at, for example, ING, who did that kind of story, I mean, at the end, they did it, also to rationalize the cost savings, but it took a long time and a lot of investments, and that is a little bit the hurdle. So when they decide now, it's more on, okay, we have issues with the platform. And we cannot cope with the change. It takes too long. So we are finding some regulator, all that kind of stuff that comes together, and we have not the capabilities, the people anymore.
Right.
And I will not attract young talents. If I say, okay, you can let's say develop on a mainframe in COBOL. So that is a mix of different arguments, but you will not argue only with a business case, because core banking renewal, I mean, it's hard to find a business case.
We sort of talked about this a little bit before we kind of came on stage, but we talked about kind of reducing costs as one factor, but how do you sort of see this playing out from, I guess, both on the bank side, but also on the new banks, the fintech side of it? Is it basically the kind of race to the bottom in terms of whoever can just keep the lowest unit economics for just pure transactional? Or what do you think as the market is an opportunity for creating effectively the more luxury premium services, which you're seeing from the likes of N26, Monzo, and others, which of course have a free product, but then also trying to position something that's more premium, that's paid, that's subscription based, that's kind of taking more of the subscription based model, which you're seeing, in Netflix and Spotify, and seeing if they can apply that to banking. I mean, that's very early days for that, but how do you kind of see that playing out?
Well, you've got to find something that truly differentiates you. The last thing you want is to be stuck in a race to the bottom. So you have to start looking at what is it that you provide. Is it a particular service that's unique and difficult to copy or copy fast, because then an incumbent's going to come in and just do it, half as well, but they already have the customer base. So it could just be quick decisions, better customer experience. What you don't want to be doing is offering the exact same thing for the exact same price. That's not compelling, because you're going to just never hold on to any of those customers.
The problem here, of course, for all the startup fintechs and the rest, is scalability. So you have to really attract, if you're offering whatever service that might be, even if it's a premium service, you still need scale. So you have to have a lot of customers to make money of it. And that is a tough market. Like in the UK, for example, the banking sector is notoriously apathetic. People just never bother to change their current account, no matter what the government does. Like there is a current account switching service now in place, there are all sorts of incentives, and people are still like, I think that people get divorced, I think, more often than they actually change their bank. So to try kind of to stimulate that. Perhaps with the new generation growing up now and the new generation hitting that, starting to work and earning money, they have a slightly different mentality. They have like less apathy, and they more tend to like shop around, and switch, so they just don't care.
But that's your second bank account, not your primary bank account, because that's just way too much effort. And if you're switching for the color of the bank card,
that's true.
That doesn't sort of justify the admin.
Yeah, and if you look at the guys like, Monzo and Starling that are in the press a lot in the UK and all very cool, I mean, they're burning through millions to advertise. And yes, a hipster in Shoreditch would have their bright coral card, but how much money they're going to keep on it? Like, 100 quid. Where is their main salary going to go? Probably to, I don't know, Nationwide or Barclays. So it's a tough times. But just to come back to the core banking transformations and the likes, the big guys never do it because they want to. They do it because they have to, right? And retiring talent. I don't know if you guys remember a few years back, quite a few very large Australian banks went through core banking transformation, like Suncorp, for example. They were all using the American system called Hogan, and basically the entire workforce retired within a span of 5 years. So they had nobody left. Even the pensioners that were staying on didn't want to stay on. They were like, you know what, man, I'm 85. I think I'm going to go. So they had to go to market. And in the case of Suncorp, I mean, it's been 12 years or something. And their new core banking system, I'm not sure it's still up and running because the CEO has recently been in the press saying we'd really like to see some results. It's been 12 years. So, yeah.
But that's interesting. I mean, really driving forces are, if it comes to regulatory topics, and those, if you have issues with the service itself, this is really driving, much more than having a compelling business case. So here we see the most, let's say, reasoning for agreeing on, okay, let's go onto that modernization journey.
Right.
But a business case is the most compelling if there's a regulatory deadline, and then being able to show, there's no guessing out of it. And then the next is cost. Yeah. And then the final option is future revenue. If you can show quick ROI and kind of incremental value throughout, it's a lot easier to prove. But then you're looking at incumbents versus challengers. Challengers are looking to grow fast and kind of without taking on too much cost below. Whereas if you look at an incumbent bank that's got a gun to their head, being able to go through a transformational journey, Big Bang is just a very traumatic experience. If you can show that incremental cost reduction, that's something you can hold on to as opposed to something that may happen in the future.
Yes.
I was thinking when we were talking about people, obviously there's a lot of stories about, COBOL developers and retiring, but isn't there sort of a different angle on that in terms of, at the end, they know they're going to be, in one way or another, whatever systems they use, very tech-driven, tech-enabled businesses. And technologists usually like to work with good new technology. So is there already a concern about from a pure talent perspective, not just retired developers who are not using the old languages, but engineers, technical talent is highly prized in the market, and they have the pick of choice of working for any company that they want to. So isn't there perhaps a people sort of angle that if you don't have compelling technology to work with, then the only thing you can really do is just keep throwing money at developers to help you attract them, which for some developers may or may not work anyway, because then they kind of burn out playing with old tools. But also it actually then massively starts to escalate your costs in a way that was probably never quite budgeted before, because, I don't know, you assumed you can get a developer for 100K and suddenly your costs double because they say, well, yeah, I'll come here, but I really hate your technology, so I'm not going to work for less than 200K. And that's probably not something you could have budgeted for before. So how much do you think that talent, the attraction of the right sort of technical talent plays a role in the consideration of what they're using?
It probably does, but at the same time, I can't see, say, the board sitting there thinking, oh, we can't get tech guys, so let's go through a 5 billion transformation just because of that, So I suppose on the probably lower management levels and in the executive levels, people are desperately thinking about that. Whether that goes all the way to the top, I am not so sure. But it's definitely a concern. In the case, what do you do? Your costs go up. And also, for example, there is a big UK bank, which is, I'm not going to name it, but it's one of the big ones, and it's through and through mainframe IBM shop. You can't, everything is IBM, it has to go through IBM. So their costs are astronomical just because once a year IBM rolls in and says, you owe us this much, and they don't have a choice. And whatever new technologies they try to bring, they still have to work, or new innovative companies, they still have to work with a big vendor that is IBM. Now, I'm not saying IBM is bad or anything like that, but they are kind of in the corner, they're stuck, and I don't know what the way out for them is, if there is one.
But the staff thing is the symptom of the problem. So the reason individuals are not investing their own time and efforts in learning sort of old language, and no one's looking to learn how to code in COBOL, and why the banks are struggling to find those resources is because the new talent coming through doesn't see it as something that's going to provide them with a long-term career.
Right.
We've been built on Force.com, we're a Salesforce application, and Salesforce has executed on that ecosystem really, really well, where they've there's a huge market out there. Our customers don't have to struggle to find experts in Salesforce when they partner with us. So it's the outcome of, you know, the tech kind of expiring and then the talent's not investing, because what are you going to do on old tech? So if you can find, and I think Mambu, you'll see the same thing. Your people that are skilled on your technology will become very valuable in the market. We see that with our own people. At nCino, our folks are being headhunted all the time because they're known for being skilled. So we make people valuable, which creates a huge ecosystem that really helps.
Yeah. I think that incumbent banks, they realize that issue.
On the people side.
On the people side, of course. Because resources are becoming older and older, and and they have now the challenge, that multiple challenges. First, I mean, banking is not banking as 10 years ago. So it's not that safe. So it's not that growing. It's an issue maybe also with the industry a little bit. Second, if you are skilled in those, let's say, new technologies, cloud, you name it. I mean, you can go everywhere. So we see that I did a project. It was a very, say, famous public institution. They are also facing the issue that they will not find the right resources and talents. So, and they need to do something. So, employee branding is a key topic. And there's a lot of measures they address in the recruiting space to really attract people. First. And second, it's also a measure, I mean, maybe to have a separate unit or pool, whatever, where you build up those talents. There's also something, what is an argument for building up, for example, a new business line, with also new technology, on another platform. So that is front to back also addressing the right people, and not mixing it up with, let's say, the legacy.
Right. And working with, let's say, third parties in terms of actually on the technical talent part of it, let's refer to it broadly. So in the projects that we've seen many case scenarios where anything from the team does completely everything themselves in-house, right? They have all developers, every single person, they work with nobody externally except just whatever talented skills they have, to almost the opposite extreme, where effectively they bring different consultants, system integrators, and they effectively run it at a very high executive level, but effectively most of the actual work is done by third parties, still bringing in different composable banking systems into the architecture, but it's at a very different level in terms of who's executing it and who's actually making decisions around it. What is kind of your thoughts around what is the sweet spot and the best way of how banks, or I guess even tech companies, should approach it in terms of what capability is critical for them kind of to develop internally as, like, their own muscle so they actually know it, versus what's the sort of work that they can effectively externalize and leave more as a commodity so they don't really bring it into their own organization and culture?
There are, how long is a piece of string, right? So I guess there is a sweet spot somewhere in the middle, but it also varies from geography to geography, and culturally there are lots of differences as well. For example, if you look at Turkey, for instance, if you look at the banks in Turkey, most of them have traditionally had very large captive IT departments, which are like a standalone subsidiaries with hundreds of people working on their developments specifically for those banks. And it had worked very successfully for them. For example, Garanti Bank, which is big, one of the biggest Turkish banks, has been ahead of the curve with introducing like contactless, like way before in Europe, people never even thought about that, So they already had it. So it depends. I can't imagine cultures will change overnight and suddenly big banks, or banks in France, for example, who have big IT arms, are going to say, right, we're going to get all these people going, now we're going to outsource. So that's not going to happen. But my guess is each institution has some kind of view of what is core to them that they want to preserve, in-house, and then try to give other work to external specialists as much as you can, because it's very difficult to keep all that expertise in-house. It's probably very expensive as well. And, but at the same time, as you said, all banks were not built for change. So it's very difficult for them to change. And it's going from the mindset to the budgets, to the way processes are structured, to the way you work with external contractors and firms. It's a whole big process on its own, a very big undertaking.
I think you've got to be honest about where your core capabilities are and then how you want to run your business thereafter. And over and above that, looking at if you're buying technology to sort of accelerate that sort of end game of yours. So if you're adopting a solution like nCino or Mambu or something else, you also have a dependency on that vendor and their delivery capabilities and suggestions. And so I would say no two are alike, but there is a preference that you've got to really look at and say, what do we need long term to be able to have independence, to be able to make changes ourselves, but without overloading ourselves with a huge IT team that really isn't going to have that much to do once we go live. And then looking at things like, let's not automate the same process. Let's take the guidance of maybe others, be them consultancies or your technology partner, in defining what the best way and the best journey is. And so it's hard to, how long is a piece of string, right? Like how varied is the option available to you? But it's hard to go and say, right, we're going to get rid of an army of folks that have been loyal to your organization and been instrumental in your success overnight.
Well, I think, so looking at the financial institutions, they have to do a proper workforce management, of course, and especially in the change budgets. It is usual that you have external support, The problem is to which extent, We have seen ratios of 80% externals, so externals steering externals. It's good for our business, But frankly speaking, at the end of the day, it has to pay off, and I think there might be an issue. So for companies like Mambu or software vendors, I think where's the sweet spot? I think, and I was, before joining 15 years ago BCG, I was with SAP, so I know a bit the vendor space, we were always doubtful if there were implementations only done by system integrators. So I would always recommend, bring in the vendor, also to make him responsible. So tell me, what is available for the system? What's not? And if not, okay, we have to discuss. So I think you need to have some very good product specialists, who understand the situation of the client, transfer it into what is doable with your solution, and then you also should take a stake into the implementation in terms of responsibility doing quality assurance, etc. So that's something I would recommend to vendors in the new platform space. So the long end implementation, I don't know, interfaces, whatever, okay, that can go to the system integrator, I would say. And on top, you need somebody, let's say, who helps on the steering side. So somebody who, let's say, oversees it, and looks at everything is in time, budget, and scope, hopefully. So usually our sweet spot, I would say.
I'd be curious, Jacqui, if it's similar to your experience, but we've seen the most successful projects, as we would find, working with traditional institutions, so larger banks and larger financial institutions. And by successful, I mean at the speed of which they were able to develop it, how quickly they were able to change, right? They have their own metrics of success, but from our perspective, how quickly they were able to execute, they all kind of had similar characteristics where beyond just working with us as a technology partner, you could feel that they wanted to actually also learn more. And somewhat to the extent of asking us, can you give us like what a job profile would look like for a person that would do A, B, and C, so we can go hire them. I don't know if it's been sort of similar experience on your side, but I feel like some of them are equally as interested in purely, of course, the technology and service as they are understanding how do we start to operate more like you, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes us very, very nervous when a financial institution sort of says to us, right, you're the vendor, we're going to send you a list of questions, you respond to that, and we'll let you know what we're going to decide to do. Because for us, it's probably doomed, right? And then we have a bad story out in the press, and everyone hears about the bad stories, and you can have 10 good stories, but there's that one, failed implementation, and we don't want those. And so there has to be give and take and consultancy amongst all the partners that are involved in delivering, be it, the vendor, the financial institution, and a chosen partner or integrator. But there has to be a collaboration. But I've found that the banks nowadays are very consultative and realize this is a long-term gig. You're going to get married. You could have a 15-year bank account with each other, that type of thing. But you actually need to go down the path of true partnership. So our customers tend to be incredibly involved in our roadmap, incredibly engaged in our sort of our advisory boards. We have a community, an online community where we have 15,000 or 17,000 users that interact with each other, advising each other on how to implement something or adopt a new element of a release or all of that. But I feel like the mindset has changed, but also we come from the position of newer vendors. I think perhaps if you worked for a legacy tech vendor, you would just be seen as just someone selling some stuff that the bank will work out how to deal with, and it doesn't go well.
If the future is composable banking, right? So each bank will use more and more different technologies from different vendors, and it's not possible to have all that expertise in house. So surely, we're all better together, and I'm sure there is a Brexit analogy there somewhere. But
Controversial.
And I couldn't agree more. Or that we see that there's a mind shift. So maybe 10 years back in time, it went like this. Somebody, maybe also consultancy firms, went to the business, and they wrote down the wish list, of what the business wanted, and then they said, okay, now we do an RFP with a vendor, and if the vendor does not, let's say, fulfill these wishes, and nobody raised the question whether this is useful or not, whether there's a business case behind that functionality or not, So then they started to, let's say, do some customization. And that were the start of, let's say, a very sad story, because that are the implementations which are over budget, over time, etc. So now we see more stick to the standard. So hear what the vendor is saying, what they can do and what not, and then discuss with the business much more. Okay, do we really need it? Yes or no? So this is becoming much and more a harder conversation, and we always recommend also, let's say, changing core banking systems is also about simplifying your IT. So on the other hand, it should go along with simplifying maybe your business.
Right.
There's also a second step. Or not a second. From the logic perspective, it should be the first one.
Right.
But at least it should go hand in hand. And that's also why we are saying core banking system renewal is not a tech topic. It's a joint business tech effort they have to do from both sides. And it doesn't make sense that the business is saying, I insist to have this feature, 4-digit interest rate calculation.
Right.
So that's something where clients are, let's say, more open to hear what is the standard and then also to realize cost benefit from that.
But there's an element of compromise, right? So every financial institution is slightly different, but there's a lot of commonality. And if you want to benefit from a SaaS solution and benefit from the input of the wider market, then there has to be some compromise which will ultimately get you to your end goal significantly faster and in a much better place so that you can consume releases and upgrade and leverage great technology.
And this is a process, and this is not a hard process. So I give you an example. So we did it on a let's say a traditional core banking system, like Temenos. So and we did run the first round doing IRFP and all the vendor workshops, and it came out it's close to 1,000 gaps. okay, we have to define what is the gap, but
Yeah.
differences between. Yeah.
Someone could say something is a huge gap, but really it
Exactly
happens
so,
once
yeah.
a month,
So-
and it's like whatever, it's fine.
And then we did the process. I mean, okay, do you really need it? Is there a business case, etc., etc., etc. Yeah. And at the end, so we had 100 changes, which were needed. So there's also a huge potential. I mean, to reduce the effort, when migrating to a new system, and reduce efforts for new functionalities.
Yeah, I think you're right. As you said, it's a change in which to go really hand in hand, right? It's a balancing act between the change in the technology, the change in the business, the operations. At the end, you should come out with something that is better and simpler at the end of it. A question that came in from someone here as well, which I thought was really interesting, was the pace of which it's happening is quite different in different regions. I mean, you have extremes like, for instance, like the UK, of course, which is seeing a lot happening both on the challenger side as well as different banks responding to it. And then you have other markets where it feels like it's still really nascent. What do you think is kind of the cause of that discrepancy? Is it in some way related to perception of cloud and cloud adoption in those markets? Is it related to the actual customers and the customer needs? Or is there something to do with, the competitive environment where if somebody's doing it, everybody feels in that market, they also have to do it? What do you think is creating? Because it is happening quite different speeds, at different paces, in different markets. And then sometimes a place just went from nothing to super active. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's a combination of many factors, and the customer demand on one hand and competition and regulation. The reason the UK was so ahead is the regulators actually were very proactive in loosening, the grip on monopoly. So they said, okay, we're going to just lower the barriers to enable competition.
Right.
And London is an international hub, plenty of tech talent, plenty of ideas. So it just created that environment for, all these challenges and new companies to come and grow. But if you look at America, for example, in the States, I'm sure there is still lots of innovation there, but the majority of folks, they're still writing checks. So, and never heard of contactless.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, looking at where the markets are. Plus, the US is very fragmented. In addition to federal states, you have 50 different regional state laws. And
more complex in Europe in some sense.
It's extremely complex. So, but then you look at the markets such as Australia, for example, they are fast, or Canada, they are fast followers. They looked at the UK, they're like, oh, we'll have some of that. Thank you very much. Open banking, yeah, we'll try it. And they are moving at a really decent speed. So it's like to be able to imitate fast.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think a driver of change is also there is a cultural element, but then there's also how do you recognize that return on investment? So in the US, you can offload entire teams, within 2 weeks. In other countries, employment laws do not quite allow you to just get rid of 1,000 people overnight and kind of say, right, let's write that off. So there are other drivers for change. And so as you're just putting a business case in front of the board, it has to stack up. So some regions aren't compelled by the same drivers as others.
Yes. Well, it's an interesting question. So
That's all you say.
I also asked myself, where's this difference in speed? And we observed it as well. So there's a difference within Europe. So Western Europe, UK, but also this, Spain, Portugal, they're running much faster, what we observe, rather than Central Europe, and maybe Nordics is also more advanced in that. Yeah. So this is already in Europe, and here regulation should be more or less the same, right? Yeah. So I think it's a cultural topic also. Yeah. And then if you move to Middle East is also has a lot of momentum currently. We observe in the last 24 months. Australia, I fully agree. I think there was a first mover. I mean, the market is not so scattered. Yeah, there are only, I think, 5 large banks, and one was moving fast, and the others are now following. I would say, yeah. So at the end of the day, I think it's really a mix of different, let's say, reasons why we see that different speed. And maybe to add also, I think it's a bit also of, the resources and talents and people. Especially in Germany, we see that there's a lot of skepticism about the new technologies, maybe also fear about that. And also the argument of the regulator is something I personally see maybe as something what is, let's say, put in front as a kind of excuse not doing something.
Yeah, we've seen that as well, that it's sometimes used as a just as an excuse without actually engaging, right? Because actually what we've discovered in a lot of markets was that actually through the engagement, the regulators are really fundamentally concerned about protecting the customers, right? So if you ask them the right questions, then they are responsible for challenging you, as long as you actually have the right good answers, right?
Yeah, it's rather funny because now we have the situation that, as I said at the beginning, regulators are more and more green lightning. If you speak with them, and now we get some answers. Yes, okay, but we cannot move to the cloud because I don't have the capabilities and resources and skills. Yeah. Wow. Okay, here's a real argument. So then we have to do here something.
Yeah. Well, you can only solve the problem once you've actually identified what it is, right? If you're putting up fake problems, then you're going to come up with fake solutions, right? But as we said, I think a lot of it has to do with actually having people who understand where it should go, and then finding the right supporting talent to actually drive that change, I guess.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I think we're running a bit out of time.